You know that really specific kind of quiet that only happens around like 2 in the morning?
Oh, yeah, when the house is completely still.
Right. And your mind suddenly decides, out of nowhere, to serve up just the heaviest, most uncomfortable thoughts possible.
It is never a light topic at 2 a.m.
Never. And, for a lot of people, that thought usually revolves around the stark physical reality of our bodies. You lie there and realize that, from a strictly biological standpoint, death looks an awful lot like the ultimate delete key.
It really does. It's the ultimate existential dread.
Exactly. Because you spend decades building a personality, curating all these memories, accumulating knowledge, loving people, and then,
The local hardware just fails.
yeah, the heart stops, the brain ceases electrical activity, and the physical body just decomposes into the earth. And the terrifying assumption that keeps you awake is that your consciousness, like your core essence, simply vanishes into the void. Total post-biological erasure.
And from a purely empirical vantage point, that anxiety is completely justified. When we observe the end of a biological lifespan, entropy just appears to win.
It looks like a closed loop of destruction.
Right. The organism breaks down, the cellular structure dissolves, and the accumulated data of that lifetime seems permanently lost to the topsoil.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because what if we are measuring the end of life with the entirely wrong metric?
I like where you're going with this.
What if biological death isn't a delete key at all? For today's deep dive, we're taking you on a pretty intense intellectual journey to confront this exact fear of erasure.
It's a fascinating reframing of the problem.
It really is. We are exploring this through a highly unconventional lens. We're looking at a book by J.R. Ahmed called The Algebra of Revelation, specifically focusing our attention on his analysis of a chapter titled Qaf.
And to frame this properly for you listening, we're deliberately stepping away from traditional theological readings today. Ahmed's approach is entirely different.
Way different.
He argues that this specific text operates as a highly sophisticated systemic audit. He reads it through the lens of pure information theory.
Which is such a wild way to look at it.
It is. He's viewing the universe not as a random collection of matter, but as an engineered system with structural power and absolute storage capacity.
Which is a massive paradigm shift. I mean, to figure out if your personal data, your consciousness, can actually survive physical death, Ahmed suggests you first have to understand the foundational hardware of the universe itself.
Right. Is the cosmos just this chaotic, accidental collision of particles that inevitably leaks data? Or is it a perfectly enclosed framework built specifically to preserve it?
That's the pivotal question.
Yeah.
It sets the foundation for Ahmed's entire analysis.
It really does.
Yeah.
And he directs our attention to the Arabic letter that opens the chapter, the letter Qaf.
Just a single letter.
Just a single letter.
Yeah.
But in his reading, this is far more than a phonetic starting point. It functions as a systemic header for reality.
Like a line of code.
Exactly like that. Within the text's internal lexicon, Qaf acts as the semantic anchor for a concept called qadar.
Qadar. Which translates to what, roughly?
It translates to calculated decree or proportion. Essentially, it represents the mathematical principle of absolute precision. It dictates that there is zero random mutation in the divine system.
Wait, let me stop you there because I feel like I need to push back on this idea of flawless, calculated perfection.
I figured you might.
Well, yeah. Because if the universe is fundamentally built on absolute precision, like a perfectly coded operating system, where is the tangible proof of that? Because from our human vantage point down here on the ground, things look incredibly chaotic.
They certainly seem that way, yes.
Right. We experience random genetic mutations, tectonic plates fracturing into natural disasters, the constant degradation of our environment through entropy. It doesn't look like a tightly controlled system. It looks like a system that is constantly breaking down.
What's fascinating here is how the text actually anticipates that exact ground-level skepticism.
Oh,
Yes. Ahmed points out what he terms the literal synthesis of this system. The text establishes that this proportional law, the Qaf, is the strict parameter that allows the universe to safely expand.
expand into what?
Into a state it calls Majud, or the expanding glory. Think of it as the precise hardware constraints that allow the software of reality to grow infinitely without fragmenting or crashing.
So the boundaries actually allow for the growth.
Precisely. But to address your pushback regarding proof, the text doesn't demand blind belief. It commands an empirical macro proof. It basically tells the observer to zoom out.
Ah, the audit of the sky.
Exactly, the audit of the sky. The observer is directed to examine the astrophysics of the heavens above. The text asks how the universe was constructed and points out one specific structural detail.
That it has no rifts.
No rifts. And in the language of structural engineering or computer science, a rift is a fatal bug.
Like a literal system crash.
Yes, a system crash resulting from a miscalculation in the baseline proportion.
So the argument is that if the foundational math was even slightly off, the universe would have torn itself apart billions of years ago.
Without a doubt.
We wouldn't have stable orbits, we wouldn't have predictable gravity, we'd just have a cascading system failure.
That is the core of the macro proof. The visible, flawless mechanics of the celestial bodies over unfathomable stretches of time that serves as a massive, ongoing hardware test.
Wow.
It demonstrates to the observer that the architect of the system made zero miscalculations in the baseline Qadar. The proportion is absolutely perfect.
Okay, I can accept that the macro hardware of the universe is stable. The stars aren't falling out of the sky. But that brings us crashing right back into the central anxiety we started with at the top of the deep dive.
The physical death.
Yeah. It is relatively easy to observe the perfect orbit of a planet and feel a sense of cosmic order. But it's an entirely different emotional experience to stand over a grave and look at a human body turning to dust.
It's deeply confronting.
It is. So, if the universe's macro hardware is flawlessly maintained, what is the mechanical explanation for what happens to the localized user data S when our biological hardware inevitably degrades?
Well, the text actually quotes the skeptics who voice that exact visceral anxiety.
They bring up the decomposition.
Yes. They question the logic of a return after physical decomposition. They literally look at the bones turning to dust and challenge the system, asking how a biologically degraded entity could possibly be restored.
And what's the system's response?
The system's response is chillingly precise. It states, "We know what the Earth diminishes of them, and with us is a preserved book, a kitabuna fun."
Here's where it gets really interesting, especially for anyone who works with modern technology. Ahmed doesn't frame this Kitabunafen as like a literal book bound in leather with parchment pages.
No, not at all.
He translates the concept into the ultimate master database, a systemic cloud server. Let's use an analogy here.
Okay, go for it.
Imagine you are working on a crucial project on your laptop, and you accidentally drop that laptop into a lake.
Oh, devastating.
Total nightmare, right? The physical hardware is completely destroyed. The motherboard is corroded, the screen is shattered, the local drive is submerged in mud. It's a total loss.
A localized hardware failure.
Exactly that.
Yeah.
But if you have your system set up correctly, you don't actually mourn the data. I mean, you might be annoyed about having to buy a new laptop.
Or the expense.
Yeah, but you don't lose sleep over the information. Because you know that all your files, your photographs, your keystroke preferences, your exact data signature, were actively syncing to a remote cloud server the very moment before the laptop hit the water.
That captures the mechanism perfectly. When the text states, "We know what the Earth diminishes of them," it's confirming that the system is fully aware the physical carbon is being recycled by the Earth's ecosystem.
So it knows the laptop is in the lake.
Exactly. The system tracks the entropy of the local device, but the biological body is just the temporary chassis.
Just a shell.
Right. The highly complex, unique sequence of information that constitutes your consciousness, your memories, your specific personality, what Ahmed calls your data signature, is instantaneously and perfectly retained.
In that master database, the Kitabunafian,
Yes, it is constantly synced.
which entirely reconfigures how you process mortality. If we follow this logic, death ceases to be an erasure of data,
It's downgraded.
downgraded to a mere hardware malfunction. The COF protocol, that foundational law of absolute precision we talked about, acts as a guarantee that zero information is ever lost to the entropic decay of the material world. We literally exist inside a mathematically closed loop.
And if the universe's fundamental operating principle is Qadar, precise measure, then losing a high-density data stream like a human consciousness would be a catastrophic violation of the system's own structural integrity.
The system wouldn't allow it.
Exactly. For the system to remain mathematically perfect, the data must persist.
You know, finding out that your exact data signature is safely backed up in a cosmic cloud server offers a profound sense of relief. I think anyone listening to this can appreciate the elegance of that concept.
It's very comforting.
It is. But it naturally provokes the next mechanical question. A backup drive sitting in a server farm is entirely useless if the overarching system lacks a protocol to download that data back into a usable format.
The reinstantiation.
Yeah, how does the data actually reinstantiate?
The text transitions straight into answering that, providing what Ahmed outlines as the functional proof of resurrection.
I love that phrase.
It's very clinical, isn't it? Rather than relying on abstract philosophy, the system points to a mundane, observable biological case study. It points to the phenomenon of the dead land.
I found this part of Ahmed's analysis particularly striking. The text describes a landscape that is just completely barren. No visible signs of life, cracked earth, essentially a massive biological graveyard.
And the observer is told to watch as blessed rain is sent down from the sky to revive this dead land. And the process concludes with a defining mechanical phrase, Kadalika al-Kuduj,
Meaning,
thus is the emergence. Ahmed enriches this by cross-referencing another chapter, Surah al-Muminun, which specifically emphasizes that this water is sent down in measure, or by Quran.
bringing back the measure.
Yes, the life-giving signal is deeply tied to the cost protocol of precise calculation.
So what does this all mean for the concept of coming back from the dead? Because historically, resurrection is always painted as a supernatural, reality-breaking miracle, like a total suspension of the laws of physics.
That's the traditional view, yes.
But Ahmed is pointing out that the text frames it as a strictly rational, mechanical law. You take a dormant environment, you introduce a highly specific, mathematically measured activation signal, in his biological example, water, and the hardware automatically begins to recompile itself.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the text is systematically dismantling the magical literalism that humanity usually projects onto the afterlife.
It grounds it.
It grounds it completely. It is reframing the return of consciousness not as a mystical event, but as a scheduled data reinstantiation.
A scheduled data reinstantiation. Just sit with that phrase for a second. It implies that compiling a human being back into existence is fundamentally no more supernatural than rebooting a computer from a master backup drive once a new motherboard has been installed.
It's the exact same logic.
Your core code is just resting securely in the Kitabun. It's simply waiting for the cosmic equivalent of rain, that specific activation signal, to compile the new physical hardware and download your precise data signature back into it.
And the logic scales up beautifully. It uses an observable natural process like the rain reviving dormant seeds to prove a systemic constant.
The micro proving the macro.
Exactly. If the architect's framework can mechanically reinstantiate complex plant biology from desiccated spores using a calculated physical trigger, well, then the underlying mechanism is already proven.
It's just a matter of scale.
Right. Applying that exact same mechanism to reinstantiate human consciousness from a preserved master database is just a matter of processing a higher density file.
The rationality of it is deeply compelling. But my mind immediately jumps to the sheer logistical scale of an operation like this.
The processing power required.
Right. If this self-sustaining framework is actively tracking and backing up the real-time data signatures of billions of human beings, calculating the entropy of every atom they shed, processing every single cognitive thought, and then meticulously scheduling their future reinstantiation, the processing power required would be beyond human comprehension.
It's an unfathomable amount of data.
Does a system carrying that much computational load ever lag? Does the server overheat? Or I guess more importantly, does the core programming ever shift its parameters under that kind of pressure?
This brings us to the crucial safeguard of the system. It's the concept of the immutable statement, or the qual.
The qual.
Yes. Earlier, we established quaff as the root for proportional execution. Well, the text contains a specific declaration regarding this execution. It says, "The word will not be changed with me, and I am not at all unjust to the servants."
The word will not be changed, meaning the core code is locked.
Locked tight. That is the functional utility of absolute immutability. Ahmed analyzes this by pointing out the alternative.
What happens if it isn't locked?
Right. If the word, the final decisive output of the system, were changeable, or if the system could be subjected to emotional bribery, or if the code could be hacked to favor one user over another, the entire universe would be fundamentally unstable.
It would be chaos.
Absolute immutability is the structural guarantee of objective justice. The data is processed, the behavioral metrics are weighed with flawless precision, and the resulting execution of the code is structurally inevitable.
Which is, frankly, a terrifying thought if your personal data signature is riddled with behavioral malware.
Very true.
But it's profoundly reassuring if you value absolute, incorruptible justice.
The universe isn't ruled by some capricious entity prone to changing its mind. It is governed by an unbroken, unhackable law.
A flawless execution protocol.
Yeah, but that still leaves my question about the processing power itself. How does the system handle the literal energy load without degrading? Ahmed's deep dive into the concept of Luhub completely rewired how I think about this.
Ah, yes. The systemic audit of the original creation event, it serves as the ultimate proof of the system's capacitive power.
The text states that the heavens and the earth and everything between them were created in 6 days, and the Creator was touched by zero fatigue, zero Luhub.
Zero Lucube.
And in a traditional reading, you might just gloss over that and think, okay, sure, the Creator is infinitely strong and doesn't require a rest period. But analyzing it through the lens of structural physics and thermodynamics, it becomes a statement of staggering scientific magnitude.
It really does. And this raises an important question for you listening. What actually is fatigue in a mechanical sense? Right, take the biology out of it.
Exactly. If we strip away the biological feeling of being tired and look strictly at physics, fatigue is the direct result of inefficiency.
Like friction.
It is the byproduct of friction, of heat dissipation, of wasted kinetic energy within a system. When a car engine experiences fatigue or when mechanical parts wear down, it is because energy is being lost to entropy. The second law of thermodynamics dictates that in every single energy transfer, some energy is lost to chaos.
So by explicitly stating that the monumental effort of manifesting the universe resulted in absolute zero Luhub, the system is making a definitive claim about its thermodynamics.
A massive claim.
It isn't just boasting about divine stamina, it is proving its absolute mathematical efficiency. The architect compiled the entire cosmos, every spinning galaxy, every burning quasar, every microscopic strand of biological DNA, and the energy expenditure required to execute that massive code resulted in strictly zero entropy for the source.
It represents a literal zero entropy creation event. The foundational proportional design, the QOF, is so utterly flawless that it requires zero effort to run. There is absolutely no friction within the divine system.
None.
And if an operating system can generate and sustain the entire cosmos without a single fractal of wasted energy, then the computational load of preserving and reinstantiating a human data signature is a mathematically trivial process for its servers.
It really forces you to reevaluate the existential dread we discussed at the very beginning of this deep dive.
It completely lips it.
We started with the localized fear of the biological delete key, the terrifying assumption that our fragile, easily damaged physical bodies are the only vessels that can hold our existence.
Which is such a limiting view.
So limiting.
Yeah.
But walking through Ahmed's systemic audit of QOF, you begin to perceive reality through an entirely different framework. You start to see a universe defined by absolute, unyielding precision.
A mathematically closed loop?
Yeah, a reality where your essence, your memories, your highly specific consciousness functions as an indestructible data signature, continuously safeguarded by a self-sustaining, zero-entropy architect.
It systematically replaces that paralyzing fear of the void with a profound, quiet awe for the architecture. You begin to understand that the entropy we observe on a daily basis, the decay of organic matter, the crumbling of stone, that is strictly a localized functional process.
It's just local wear and tear.
Precisely.
Mm.
It is a necessary feature of the temporary biological hardware, not a systemic flaw in the master database. The overarching system itself is entirely lossless.
To realize that the exact mathematical certainty keeping the stars from colliding is the exact same certainty ensuring that not a single byte of who you are is ever permanently deleted. I mean, it fundamentally alters your relationship with your own mortality.
It really does. And I think that leaves us with a truly fascinating implication to consider as we close.
Oh, absolutely.
If the universe's master database perfectly and effortlessly preserves our exact data signature long after the physical carbon has decayed into the Earth, and if our biological bodies are nothing more than temporary recyclable hardware used to navigate this specific environment,
Right.
does that mean the true core of human identity has never actually been physical at all? Perhaps we are, at our very essence, pure mathematical information, meaning your consciousness isn't something that possesses the capacity to decay. It is simply waiting for the precise activation signal for its next download. Listen closely for that underlying pulse in the architecture. It's not a countdown to erasure, it's the hum of the framework holding your place in the system.